So I had to flash that up real quick. I think we're ready to go. Hold on. Let me make sure because I don't want this thing to keep playing. Let me get to my correct page here. All right. We are officially live. Hello, good morning, everyone, or good evening, wherever you are out there. Welcome to another Weird Woden's Dog live stream. You're here with your host today, Brady. I'm here to wander today through the weird, the wonderful, and sometimes the wicked, as we're connecting a bunch of interesting conspiracy history-related topics. And if you enjoy the work that we do around here, make sure you check out all the links down below in the description. Thank you to all of our Patreon, YouTube channel members, and Substack subscribers. I couldn't do this without you. Please, if you'd like to support the channel other than liking and subscribing, if you'd like to come hang out with us on Discord, join either the any of the Patreon tiers, and you can come get a private Discord access. Come join the Areopagus book club, where we're reading literature discussing deep philosophy and Shakespearean conspiracies every single week. And couldn't do this without everybody and all that support, so make sure you check that all down below. Now, without further ado, and I am a little helter-skelter this morning, viewers of the channel will know that we've gone deep on that phrase itself, even that Beatles phrase. Go check out the Folgers in the Folio live stream. But yes, I'm a little helter-skelter. I had some technical difficulties getting my computer up and running for this stream. And it's, I kind of had the idea. It's sort of a continuation from last week's stream where we talked about some One Piece stuff. And I just kind of talked about One Piece. It's an anime show. And I talked about specific elements in that show that I just happen to know about in specificity, essentially. And so I'm a little erudite in this character known as Jean Laffite. And it turned out that there is a character in One Piece whose name is Laffite. And so knowing, hearing that was a part of the show definitely piqued my interest when I was first getting into it. So I kind of talked about that. But during the stream, or maybe afterwards, I kind of said oh yeah, Jean Laffite is kind of like a Jeffrey Epstein type guy, and maybe not in exact sense, but in some ways they've got some interesting parallels. And I've wanted to, I thought when I started this channel a long time ago, that I'd eventually get around to talking about Jean Laffite, because he's a character that I'm particularly fascinated in. You might know I've got a Galveston obsession if you watch my Joe Rogan and the Galveston Gangsters video. Pretty much everything Galveston, and I've only got one little section here. This is everything on Galveston and Jean Laffite. This is a general Galveston, but yeah, a lot of this is Jean Laffite related stuff, and I guess some Macias stuff in here too. And yeah, it's just been something that's been near and dear to my heart, and geographically relatively near me. And so yeah, and I had this, like I said, I had an epiphany, and I was like, oh, maybe this is an interesting comparison that I can actually make between Jean Laffite and Jeffrey Epstein, and not just because of this human cargo, human trafficking kind of angle that we'll definitely get into, but maybe some other ones that are a little spicier, if you catch my drift. So make sure you have your coffee ready this morning. I'm ready. All right, and so in case you don't know, we're talking about maybe if you're maybe from the south of the United States, you might know a little more. I've heard a little more about Jean Laffite. And there's also that was a crazy synchronicity, I want to say. Whereas in the the Chip and Dale cartoon show, in the very first episode, which I had watched a year and a half ago, just on a whim with the kids, I just put on the first one, and they are essentially they head to a sunken pirate ship, but I think they actually do say it's Jean Laffite's pirate ship, which is actually kind of funny. So yeah, he kind of gets called a pirate by lots of people, but hold on here, yeah, he kind of gets called by a pirate by a lot of people, and that's sort of a loose term. He would like to have been called himself a privateer. Oh no, my son's trying to bust in here. He may have been called a privateer actually, which is like an official, legitimate pirate, if you could actually call it that, And so it's kind of hazy about, to one man he's a privateer and to another man he's called a pirate. It just depends on who he's writing that day. Maybe is what they would call him, right? So let's see. I'm trying to, and one of the other big things that he's really well known for is his involvement with the Battle of New Orleans during the War of 1812. You see. And so, Battle of New Orleans. Here, I'll throw some of these links up here. Won't stay on me. Okay, so Battle of New Orleans. Here's Laffite himself. This is like a presumed portrait, but it's not guaranteed. But otherwise, he's known for his involvement with the Battle of Galveston. And I remember his involvement sort of being hyped up when I was like in middle school, high school. Like he just always gets like a mention. Like and the privateer Jean Laffite, who aided the Americans during it. And it's kind of colorful little tidbit there. Oh, cool, like a little pirate. Pirates helping out with this war. That's kind of interesting, right? But the real history is a lot hazier than that. So, but I'm just in a general sense, this is what he's known for. And then after being in New Orleans, he will eventually head to Galveston, and that is particularly what I'm interested in, of course, right? But we're going to trace, I'll go through a bunch of his history, and we'll kind of look through the biography here on the wiki, and I've got tons of notes and stuff pulled up on all these books I have up, so I should be able to source a little bit. Here I am. Boop, I popped up on the screen now. So, where do we want to start? I might get to go into the spicy stuff right away, because that's kind of where we're going to go. And I actually mentioned this in the stream from last week, okay, when I was talking about Jean Laffite. And so we have this privateer pirate guy. Obviously, you can kind of hear that there's some French origin, or maybe supposedly origin, with this character, right? Because obviously the name Laffite is kind of a unique one in of itself too, And so if we scroll up here to the top, and we're gonna wander through this, and I'll try to connect this back to Jeffrey Epstein as we proceed along, and be like, it doesn't remind you of this, it doesn't remind you of this, this thing that we've heard. And so, all right, let's just go with the origins. Let's see what Wikipedia gives us, right? And I'll be able to corroborate most of this stuff, because once again, like I've got plenty of sources right here, right? And I've got notes and books, and I've been to the Laffite Historical Society, and I've talked to the people that have written on Facebook this book called Laffite Revealed. But this one right here is pretty much the solid academic take, mainstream take probably on him, right? But I've got some other sort of auxiliary sources that we're going to go into, right? So there's this other book that's more recent than some of these. It's called Freebooters and Smugglers, and it's talking about foreign slave trade in the United States. But we're going to get some of this, Laffite is a sort of big figure in this slave trade, which is a big deal. So, and like Disney, I think it is Disney. Disney did a film on Jean Laffite, and it kind of involves the Battle of New Orleans and some other stuff. But maybe once again he's kind of painted as like a hero, that he's kind of getting some cool shout outs, and maybe the picture is just not as nice, is how we would say it, right? Okay, so we'll go into the origins. This is, once again, we can just go into some basic history on this stuff, and I've got plenty of notes that I'll refer to or whatever. So a number of details about Jean Laffite's early life remain obscure, pretty true, and often sources contradict each other. In the Journal de Jean Laffite, which is a supposed journal by Laffite that was like handed down or left around somewhere by someone, that details and it tells of like during the time of Laffite on Galveston Island, right? So, but some people doubt its authenticity. This journal though claims to have been born in Bordeaux, France, in 1782, Sephardic Jewish parents. Okay. Well, there we go, right off the bat. His maternal grandmother and mother, both conversos, fled Spain for France, In 1765, his maternal grandfather had been executed by the Inquisition for Judaizing. Okay. Some sources say that his father was French and his mother's family had come from Spain. Laffite and his brother, so he's got a brother that may be a half brother, might not even be a real brother. People don't really quite know. But he's got a brother that's always hanging out with him. His name is Pierre. And so, yeah, I've seen other people say that. Let's see. Other documents of the period place his birthplace at Saint Malo or Brest. I don't remember this one at all. We got a biography, 96, saying there was a convenient time to be a native of France, a claim that provided protection from the enforcement of American law. Yeah, so hiding identities, this man, and as we trace it down the later, maybe if he switches his name again, sort of hints at this sort of protean type character, right? Who's able to, much like we would see of like an intelligentsia type figure, right? That I'm going to make a case for Epstein being able to kind of have a lot of his background remain kind of obscure and nebulous, right? And hard to pin down, and Laffite's here in spades. And we're already kind of here with the first linkage, right? And I don't want to make it, once again, this is the spicy part, but obviously we're talking about Jeffrey Epstein too, and what's his technically his his background. Yes, he's got a Jewish background, right? Oh, he went to Mark Twain Junior High. That's true. But otherwise, yes, Epstein is a clear name for his ethnicity or lineage or whatever, right? And as I mentioned in the the One Piece stream, is that there's a lot of people that will claim that Jean Laffite is actually a Jewish, the Sephardic Jew, and some of the people that I'll point out here in just a minute are definitely Jewish and are definitely Portuguese Jews, and that's how we actually get a lot of our history is from these other characters, these De La Porta brothers that we'll talk about in a minute. I meant to have this pulled up so I could read about what they'll say about him in this particular history book. And I already pointed out during the last live stream some of the ironies and claiming lineage from certain people, right? Like, oh yeah, I'm related to Jean Laffite, and there's plenty of people online and the comment boards of videos and whatever that, oh, I'm related to Laffite on my second whatever side, yada yada, right? But in this book by William C. Davis, the Pirates Laffite, the Treacherous World of Corsairs of the Gulf. Pretty solid book. He details later on that since Laffite was sort of a fan of mixed race ladies and had a bunch of bastard kids and whatnot, that they would try to distance themselves from being even if they married later on and weren't quite as quote unquote mixed race, right? They were more intense, for all intents and purposes white. They might have tried to actually distance themselves from Laffite, even though today it's like kind of cool to be related to a pirate, right? But later on, people didn't want to be related to him because of the mixed race part. But then also, I don't know if it's a little sour tasting to be to wanted to claim relation to a well-known human trafficker, slave smuggler. And it's not just there's going to be different flavors of slavery and the like, and how all that stuff gets started, but we can talk about that here in a minute. I'm trying to pull up the pages that I should have had pulled up here. I wanted to get some of his what they say, and this might just be where they're getting some of this from anyway, actually, because I think that article in Wikipedia that it's sourcing from is actually getting it from here. So 1906. Let's see. I want his background. Okay. Let's see. Where should I begin this? Yada, yada, yada. Okay. No, it's actually not getting where I need. Yeah, let's see. Well, here we go. Just opening pages of this book. This is called the Pioneer Jewish Texans, and they will claim that Laffite is Jewish, and therefore he's a early Jewish pioneer of Texas, okay? The story of the earliest Jewish adventurers in Texas embraces the lives of 4 men, 2 conquistadors, yada yada, some other guys that we're not going to talk about, and a member of Jean Laffite's colony on Galveston Island with the Karankawa Indians, a pirate named João de la Porta. Okay, and that's the guys who are going to be working for Laffite, that we actually have some artifacts for their signatures at the Rosenberg Library down in Galveston, actually. And so, man, I thought we need to get some of this. I need to see their lineages here, but I guess they don't mention it here in this book. They just mention De La Porta and a bunch of their activities, I guess. I used to have another old resource that actually kind of talked about Laffite's lineage, but yeah, it's been a minute since I looked this up, and I just wanted to kind of get this on the air. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, so I'll just read it here. Although he had sent for men to fight at the Battle of New Orleans in the War of 1812, Laffite refused to fight to liberate Texas from the Spanish. He said he felt he did more to destroy Spain's influence by attacking her treasury than by direct combat. Interesting. Laffite had gathered more than 1,000 men, and this swashbuckling Frenchman reigned as king or governor of Galveston Island. A Jew of Portuguese descent, João de la Porta, served as a secretary of the Jean Laffite encampment in Texas. João, having known this privateer in New Orleans and having arrived in Galveston before Laffite, he sold Laffite his camp. So yeah, I didn't know. I kind of forget that he was the one who was kind of doing the whole operation of what they're doing at Galveston, which is essentially like a weird slave smuggling operation, essentially. So yeah, we'll keep reading about these other guys. The secretaries of Jean Laffite here, okay? João, also called Joseph, de la Porta, and his older brother Moses de la Porta, simply called Morin, financed the first settlement of white men on Galveston Island, which included the man who would become the first governor of Texas. The de la Portas found their way to Texas in a circuitous route from Portugal. The brothers were born in Portugal and were secret Jews. At a young age, they moved to Paris, where they received their education. They later joined the European immigration of Jews to Brazil, where they worked in sugar, coffee, rubber, and chocolate industries. But their Jewishness forced them out of Brazil, whatever that means. Their brothers accumulated enough money to set sail for New Orleans. Moses was simply known as Morin, a French corruption of the Spanish word Morano, which signifies pig, a term of contempt applied to Jews who underwent forcible baptism to escape the Inquisition. Joseph O'Dyer, a historian who has written extensively on the De La Porta brothers, believed that their Jewishness got them charged with dealing in slaves and contraband. They decided to leave New Orleans. In planning their departure, Morin conceived of a way to finance their way out of New Orleans and possibly build a new business. He had watched the successful exploits of the buccaneer Jean Laffite and decided to simulate Laffite's financially successful business of privateering, legalized seizing of Spanish ships. Laffite ran his buccaneer camp on Grand Tier Island off the coast of Louisiana. He also leased vessels to South American countries rebelling against Spain. Laffite ships in the Gulf of Mexico were making terrible inroads on Spanish commerce. In 1814, the United States moved in and took possession of Laffite's Louisiana buccaneer camp, accusing him of smuggling merchandise and resisting revenue officers. When Laffite and his men joined U.S. General Andrew Jackson, future president, fighting the British in the Battle of New Orleans, Morin began his new business. And so you can kind of see how they end up, and they work with another pirate named Louis Henri, who's sort of another filibuster type revolutionary guy. We got and another thing that's really interesting about the De La Porta brothers is they also have an interesting relationship with the native Indians of this area, the indigenous Indians called the Karankawa, or like Karankawa, you might also hear. And so, learning about Laffite stuff, you might also get to learn about all the bunch of Indian stuff, which is super interesting. And there's a particular interesting episode where, although it may not have been Laffite, it might have been either some other settlers or other people that were there, but there was a sort of famous myth or story about Karen Common women being like kidnapped or taken away by some pirates from the Laffite camp. and the Karen Collins wasn't back, and so yeah, there was like a big giant war between pirates and Indians, which just kind of sounds like a really cool setup, right? Not quite pirates and cowboys and Indians, but pirates and Indians is sort of a cool mix on that, right? So I was like pointing out that little episode. But yeah, the De La Porta brothers also have a pretty interesting relationship with the Karankawas. Here's Karankawas.com. I mentioned that I've actually know the guy who does this site. He does good research on them, and so the Karankawas have an interesting relationship with this guy, this secretary of Laffite, and they called him like Blanco or something like that because maybe he was albino, I want to say, or something weird. And so let's see what we have to say about so any more about these Laporta brothers real quick. No. Laffite remained on Galveston 3 years, and Laffite had urged Joao to join him in the Yucatan, but Joao chose to stay in Galveston. And the two brothers will eventually go back to New Orleans, and that's how some of this history gets passed down is to the Dyer historian guy that we just talked about. Not Edward Dyer, who some of the usual audience might remember. Not our that Dyer name is still hanging around here, okay? So, first little connection, right, is that Laffite often is said to have Sephardic Jew background. He hangs his main financier, the guy he buys the camp from, the guy who's his supercargo, his secretary guy, and this is the artifact they actually have in the Rosenberg Library is like Zhao's signature and a bunch of this stuff. Anyway, that's our connection between first right off the bat with our Epstein guy, right, and a sort of a mysterious background type character, right? And maybe we'll also get into some government connections, right? And we even have it right here. So when Jeffrey Epstein, now we're switching back and forth. When Epstein first gets some of his jobs, he's working for the Dalton School, but who is essentially the guy that brings him on? It's Donald Barr. Who's Donald Barr? Well, he's a OSS guy. So we're talking the pre-CIA. And what's his son's name? Oh, William Barr. Oh, you mean that guy that was meant to investigate all that Jeffrey Epstein stuff that didn't really, turn up anything? Huh. What are the odds of that? Well, anyway. So here we've got Epstein, right off the bat. First connections are a dude from the OSS, right? Like, red flag. And, then he's instantly kind of plugged into, very quickly, with very little education at all, plugged into the high financier world, right? And so he, Les Wexner somewhere popped up in here. But yeah, he will eventually get also associated with Robert Maxwell, right? Because we all know Ghislaine Maxwell, his sort of madame, girlfriend, procurer. Well, her father is this dude named Robert Maxwell, who is sort of a big media magnate guy who owned a bunch of print media stuff and radio stuff. He's known for Radio Free Europe. He's known for, and also owning all the textbook companies, apparently, that, what's the name of that company? I don't remember off the top of my head. Like, maybe they'll have it on here. But yeah, he's known for a bunch of stuff. All the textbooks that apparently I would have grown up with were technically owned by his company, which is kind of crazy. That Jeffrey Epstein's father-in-law kind of figure, guy who also brings him in, is writing all of our history. Okay, so and it would have been those kind of textbooks probably exactly that where you get the cool mention of Jean Laffite the pirate helping out the Americans, right? Not this unsavory slave trade Jean Laffite picture, right? So there we go. We're already looking at some interesting connections, and of course Maxwell's background probably doesn't need to be explained again, right? He claims he's a descendant of Eli Wiesel. Okay. McGraw-Hill, yes, that's what it is. Thank you. So we have, once again, we're tracing, birds of a feather are sure flocking together, right? One type of fellow hanging out with another type of fellow. Get my drift? And, this intelligentsia, Hebraic background. Are we seeing my line of thought here? So yeah, that's our first little thing, okay? So obviously, with Jeffrey Epstein, known for as well as, now we kind of understand it to be like honeypot operations, and essentially, right? What does that really mean? Yeah, you're compromising people in the government so that way you can control their votes in any which way. And so, yeah, if you work for a particular, and when we talk about the CIA and the OSS, I'm really just talking about Wall Street and the entities of like Dutch East India Company type things, right? It's like these things never really went away, or at least these forces or these forms are still here, and these are how they operate. Is that if they need to control how legislation goes for this or that, or policy needs to be done for their sort of advantage on the back end, right? Well, you got to control the politicians, and you do this by compromising them, and yada yada yada. So there we have, and although Laffite is not known for blackmailing per se, that's not like his MO. I still think it's just the movement of human traffic as per the means to the operation is where I make that connection, right? And where are they all operating? I said that the name of the video is Caribbean Criminals, right? But I guess Jean Laffite is a little more in this region down over here, even if he may have grown up over here, because some people say he may have been born in Haiti, maybe, or something, or that he just grew up there, perhaps, and maybe escaped during the slave rebellions that were going on there when he was a kid, or younger man, anyway. So, but yeah, here's like the general vicinity that our two people of interest are sort of operating here. So, vaguely geographically connected in that sense, right? And their trade is maybe semi-connected in a sense, right? Now, let's see. All right, let me put this book up. Let me put up this other book. Now, there, although the famous meme is that Jeffrey Epstein is dead, right? Or I'm sorry, that's not what it is. The famous meme is Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. I'm sorry, that's what I'm supposed to say. So everyone knows that Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. And what do we say by that? Well, we mean to say that he's obviously that the story about him hanging himself was probably a bunch of baloney, and that's probably not what happened. Now, if in case you're not aware, it's not just that he didn't kill himself, that obviously someone else killed him. But have you thought about that? Maybe it's a thought-terminating cliche in a sense that Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, but that doesn't even answer if he died or not, because you could even say that he literally, in fact, did not kill himself, right? And that he's not even dead to begin with, and that's like it's a weird play on words that you can actually sort of extract a whole other meaning out of that same set of words, right? Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself; it was someone else, or Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. Literally, he didn't kill himself. He's not dead. He's alive. But that would what would that have to require? It would require, I'm insinuating a sort of jailbreak or something, right? And you can also say that Jeffrey Epstein also already had a jailbreak incident, right? Because he had already been caught doing a bunch of stuff in the early 2000s, and he got the quote unquote sweetheart deal. Oh yeah, don't forget he's working with Adnan Khashoggi, who's all a part of Iran-Contra. Moving on. Epstein kind of gets caught during the early years, and he only gets tried in New Mexico, and therefore he doesn't have to register as a sex offender, which is kind of skirting the law there. And then he also gets maybe this is part of the same case, I think, is that he only has to go to jail like on the weekends or something for like a day or whatever. And so it's like he kind of broke out of jail, like he didn't have to really pay for anything. But once again, what would that require? Well, he's already working with dudes that that literally are working in the government bars and people that work at the CIA and the OSS, okay, whatever. So he's already got connections. He's already connected to some of the most powerful people. Yeah, we got Greenberg on here. We got Khashoggi on here. Yeah, this guy's like working with all the. He's kind of nasty to say this, but yeah, he's also kind of like a James Bond figure, right? Flying around the world in jets and doing all sorts of stuff in exotic places, and obviously with the Bond, it's kind of gross to say a Bond girl, underage Bond girl, in that sense. And so yeah, during the first time he got caught doing all of his human trafficking stuff or whatever, he didn't have to really get in big trouble. He only had to go to jail on the weekends or whatever. This was all helped organized by Alex Acosta, who was Trump's first Secretary of Labor. So there you go, some more connections there. Now, now when he's dead, or the supposed death that I'm going to talk about from 2019, right? Some people have pointed out that someone flew a drone over his island at some point, and they caught a picture of some dude who's leaning against a golf cart that kind of looks like him, and maybe it is, maybe it's not. But I wouldn't be surprised if someone like this could fake their death and get out of the way, right? Because obviously it seems like I don't know if the public really, they'll just believe anything, in the general sense, right? That's what it's for, the mainstream media. That's just the mainstream quote unquote narrative, the mainstream lie. And so but the guy that even did the autopsy for Jeffrey Epstein, it's the same guy who did the one for JFK or something, I think what it was. Involved with the magic bullet theory. I'm pretty sure that's the same guy. So a bunch of hokey nonsense, crazy stuff that are all these weird swirling coincidences and people associated with this stuff, right? And cover-ups, potentialities. So, yeah, is it possible that maybe Jeffrey Epstein didn't actually kill himself to the fullest literal extent that he's actually still alive? I can't quite prove that at all. You can believe he's dead or not. Maybe didn't escape that one, but maybe in 50, 60 years we'll know more or something. For America's still here. So, but Jean Laffite, who are we talking about here? Jean Laffite was also, associated with getting out of jail as well, and they detail it really well here in this Laffite Revealed book by Ashley Oliphant and Beth Yarbrough. They detail that he was in jail, and he in the general history they'll say how he he was in jail and he escaped because he's dealing a bunch of stolen contraband in New Orleans area, right? So he eventually gets caught, and one thing they do really well in this book is, once again, they kind of show these interesting government connections that Laffite had, because when he was young, before he starts kind of doing all this privateering stuff, and even before New Orleans, well before Galveston, is that he gets hired as a surveyor, and he's working with official U.S. people, and they're surveying and mapping out a bunch of the rivers and bayous and other stuff in the United States. So that sort of explains how he kind of got his know-how and little smuggler route kind of stuff for New Orleans, is because he had been intimately mapping all that stuff as per a U.S. government contract, essentially, right? And he somehow, early on, he's, just seems to be a kind of a nobody. Maybe he's running away from Spain or from France or wherever he's getting away from. But somehow early on, he gets this interesting gig doing and working with a legit dude in the U.S. government who's kind of high up and has got direct orders from the president or someone very interesting, or secretary, whoever. I don't remember these off the top of my head. But and that's attested in this book, right? The general mainstream history. This is still solid stuff. But in this book, they did a little more digging on that guy. And the surveyor guy for the U.S. government, who I don't remember off the top of my head, he that's essentially how they maybe would have tracked Laffite, maybe lived past the supposed death date, because he kind of dies mysteriously or just kind of vanishes into the sunset, essentially, right? And so the theory is that maybe he faked his death and kind of went incognito and changed his name and all that sort of stuff, right? But they traced it because of that particular official U.S. government employee guy, the surveyor that Laffite worked for. They find more letters from that other guy, and they kind of catch him using a particular word. They keep calling him, like, he keeps referring to someone named, like, Red Maison Rouge or Red House, or maybe he just says Red House, and that's the famous name of the camp that Jean Laffite had in Galveston, right? So, and it's after he's dead, essentially around this time where it's like, hey, we need to, maybe if we turn up some more clues, we can figure out what happened to him. And so yeah, Laffite, once again, the case is that he's got connections inside the U.S. government, okay? And that in regards to that first to the first jailbreak in New Orleans, is that he breaks out of a jail in New Orleans, and they also do a good job of finding out who was, like, the owner of the jail and who were the police people and all the people in the local area that were involved with certain factions of the government, or definitely had sympathies for what Laffite's doing, right? Maybe they've got some money down the line. The money trickles down into their pockets per the Laffite operation, right? So you kind of get the sense that, there's people that also wouldn't mind him out of jail as well too, right? Just like people sure wouldn't mind Laffite, Epstein out of jail, maybe not spilling any beans and also not compromising anything. So this jailbreak that's orchestrated, yeah, they trace it to some very Freemasonic elements and people that are just, they're registered in all the chapters, and they're kind of involved with the jail, and they're kind of involved with all the court legal stuff, and oh, lo and behold, on their watch, things go haywire, and Laffite gets out of jail, and, then everything proceeds on merrily, right? So, take it for what you will. So we got some jailbreak connections between people, and that's because of government connections and political connections, okay? And business connections, I guess I'll say, if they don't all boil down to the same thing. So, yeah, I've got a few more notes I'll kind of say here, but I'll take some sips of coffee, see if how everyone's doing so far. If everything's making sense, let me know. All right. So, let me pull up this Freebooters and Smugglers book. And this is the one that's going to detail lots of movements of slaves in the United States. And once again, yeah, Laffite's got a big hand to play here. And some of these stories are pretty crazy. Maybe I should read the opening introduction, because it's going to talk about some other characters that are very, very, very important to Laffite, and especially if you know much about Texas history. You can't talk about Texas history or without talking about who are we talking about? Without talking about Jim Bowie. James Bowie, right? And what is he known for? The knife that is obviously named after him, the Bowie knife. James Bowie, famously known for the Battle of the Alamo, dying, right? That he was like sick in bed, I think what it was, and still fought as people came in. And who plays him in that movie? No, Billy Bob Thornton. I'm thinking of. He plays Davy Crockett or whatever. Who's the other guy who plays James Bowie? You'll have to let me know. I don't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, James Bowie, famous person in Texas history. Okay, and so in James Bowie's and his brother's early days, who is he hanging out with? What is he doing? He's buying a bunch of slaves from Laffite. Okay. Lots of slaves. Okay, so let me read up this opening bit here, this introduction to this book. In the winter of 1819, or maybe I'll just pull the book up for y'all real quick, actually. We'll do it live. Oops, I should go to Google. Freebooters and Smugglers. Here we go. Yeah, this book right here. All right, so this is what we're reading from. In the winter of 1819, the infamous Jim Bowie and his two brothers, Rezin and John, transported a coffle, a group of slaves chained together, of bewildered Africans from Texas into Louisiana, and stashed them in the wilderness not too far from a federal marshal's office. Once again, the Bowies had avoided arrest for their part in smuggling slaves into the country in violation of the 1808 law that prohibited the introduction of foreign slaves into the United States. As Louisiana land speculators, the Bowie brothers increased their wealth by engineering ruses that afforded them the leeway to bid on and purchase the registration of title for illegally imported slaves. Their role as unofficial government informants over time led to the formation of an illicit business alliance with several federal agents. The brothers had routinely informed United States Marshals about groups of slaves hidden away in the secluded forest regions of southern Louisiana. Federal law required that unclaimed and undocumented slaves be sold at government-sponsored auctions to the highest bidder, and that informants, federal agencies, and their employees share the proceeds derived from any sale. The Bowie brothers had devised perhaps the most successful smuggling scheme on the American frontier. James Resnick and myself, quote, John Bowie wrote, quote, fitted out some small boats at the mouth of the Calcasieu River and went in to trade our shares. Their plan of operation was as follows. We purchased 40 Negroes from Laffite at a rate of $1 a pound, or an average of $1.40 for each. We brought them into the limits of the United States and delivered them to a customs house. When no other prospective buyers showed up for the government sale, the Bowies walked away with a new batch of slaves, many of which they sold on the domestic market. For the Bowies, the ownership of new and valuable slaves enhanced their social standing and gave them access to the upper crust of frontier society. So yeah, they essentially go to Galveston, where Texas is sort of like, in between of being, American property or Spanish property and Mexican territory. And yeah, in this Galveston area, we got French people that are landing there. We got Mexican revolutionaries there. We got Spanish spies hanging out. We got pirates hanging out. It's a crazy place, okay? And so yeah, the scheme is for Laffite. He goes and raids a Spanish ship. He takes all the slaves to Galveston, which is part of the United States, obviously, but it's not in the United States territory officially, okay? And there's once again, the 1808 slave trade prohibition essentially says no new foreign slaves into the United States, where Spain doesn't have any of those rules, right? So they're still shipping stuff down into the lower South American regions, right? And so Laffite goes out there and he privateers or pirates a Spanish ship full of slaves, takes it to Galveston. Laffite and his brothers buy him off him, kind of like a Costco deal or something, right? Kind of buying in bulk. And then Bowie brothers will sneak him into the United States, where there's the laws basically like, hey, if you turn in, I think there's a couple of different facets to the law where the law is like, hey, if you turn in runaway slaves or whatever, then you'll get maybe even get rewards, some cash. And so obviously, in the Bowie brothers they buy them for really cheap in bulk, and then go smuggle them into the United States, pretend like, hey, we found these slaves, and maybe with the wink of a nod of the other customs officials, essentially go like, okay, well, you brought in, thanks for catching these slaves, thanks for, blah, 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 I guess they're your property now since, no one bid on them, look at that. And then they go and sell them for even higher value and for an even higher profit on the domestic market, okay? So, yeah, you buy them cheap, and then you go and turn a profit by selling these, that way you're circumventing the prohibition of the slave market, okay? So that's essentially what they're doing here. And so yeah, that's a little Jim Bowie history for you. That's how he makes his money. Is doing this giant slave laundering operation essentially into the United States and making a pretty good profit from doing so. And yeah, although Epstein is not doing something like that per se, it's just the movement of humans and their value essentially. That is the interesting part. Now, one thing that's slightly more kind of relevant to this is that Laffite is, what's Jeffrey Epstein known for? Obviously, liking the ladies, all the ladies. And so, yeah, Epstein's obviously known and associated for, bringing lots of women around him. And, once he's associated with Les Wexner and the whole Miss America Victoria's Secret stuff. Obviously, you can clearly see where Trump sort of fits into that whole thing. And Laffite is always known for, just like Epstein in a sense, for always hanging around sort of like younger, attractive women all the time. And so, yeah, Laffite, no matter what, always got sort of a girl on his arm. He's kind of, as I mentioned earlier, he's kind of interested in the mixed mulatto girls, essentially. And, yeah, he's always got a girl on him, and that's what the other book, the Laffite Revealed book about the potential faking his death and going incognito, is that, yeah, this other guy that kind of shows up this other guy who shows up in the interior of the United States, this Lorenzo Ferrer, who they postulate is perhaps Laffite. Laffite's new identity is that what did I say? Yeah, Laffite's new identity. And yeah, he shows up, this character, Lorenzo Ferrer, he shows up with, like, you know, a much younger, prettier girl that, you know, he's always kind of got around him, you know. So just per that same Laffite characteristic, right, of his particularities that, you know, maybe is once again a possible piece of evidence that Laffite did in fact fake his death or whatever. So yeah, just once again, yeah, both guys known for movements of humans, whether it's for honeypot operations or whether it's for, you know, unfortunately good old-fashioned slavery. And they're both known for definitely always keeping side pieces around all the time. So yeah, we've maybe racking up a bunch of similarities between these two. And yeah, maybe there's just something to do with all this intelligentsia and Freemasonry that are kind of connected to this sort of business, if you get my drift. They do all kind of seem sort of intertwined, which is sort of a little unsavory, as I've been saying over and over. I was trying to see if there was one other bit about, I need to read some more quotes for y'all, since I didn't mark them quite properly. I was just kind of going off the dome here. But all this stuff, like I said, is pretty solidly attested. Yeah. So, let's see. Do I have anything else for y'all as I'm doing this riff on Laffite and Jeffrey Epstein here? Yeah, because I think, yeah, other than that, yeah, so jailbreaks, intelligentsia, connections, maybe some Freemason. Oh, last bit, yeah, that's what I needed to say, is that what's Jean Laffite's, obviously, other than being known for, or making his money doing this slave laundering stuff yeah, maybe this is interesting. Other than that, he's also known for being a double agent, okay? So Laffite, once again, pretty mainstream stuff, okay? Laffite is definitely known for being a double agent for multiple people, okay? So he's spying on Mexico for Spain, because, you know, Mexico's trying to do their whole revolution or whatever. And so he's spying on Mexico for Spain and kind of feeding them information. And then also at the same turn, he's also spying on Spain for Mexico and kind of updating him about what, kind of always playing both sides no matter what. And then he does the same thing with working for the United States government too for a little bit. You know, he maybe wants to be a little more on, as it sort of said, he wants to be a little more better terms with them, or maybe he already naturally is. He does the same thing essentially to the British, because the British essentially come forward to him prior to the Battle of New Orleans. British find him and they're like, "Hey, we'll pay you if you kind of help us against the United States." And he's like, "Oh yeah, sure, yeah, I got you." And then he kind of gives the information to the United States, and that's, you know, kind of joins obviously the American side, at least in that sense. And why is that relevant? It's relevant because Epstein has also been attested, as well as definitely attested his father-in-law, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, to have been double agents for multiple different intelligentsia companies, not just the CIA in the United States, but also probably Robert Max was definitely, I think definitely Ghislaine would. I think she's British. She's raised in England. So yeah, he's definitely definitely MI6, definitely some CIA stuff, and definitely also probably Mossad and maybe whatever the Saudis also have too. They're kind of relevant to this whole operation. Maybe he also did some double agenting against Russia as well, as I want to say. So we got these same background people doing, similar-ish lines of work, got similar tastes in a couple different ways, and they're also double agents, triple agents, maybe quadruple agents, maybe in some cases. Okay, and yeah, they're working not just for one intelligentsia, but they're working for a bunch of different ones. Okay, so yeah, how do these all sort of interconnect in a sense, right? What's going on with this relation between the movement of humans and secret societies and the like, and we can kind of speculate forever about what that all entails. Some of it is just straight cash business stuff, right? And then other times it's a little more sophisticated, maybe with this sort of not that the slave laundering thing wasn't sophisticated, I guess, but the the compromising of government, and financial systems and all sorts of stuff. So kind of interesting how a lot of that stuff seems to all coalesce in a sense, and once again, yeah, kind of this not quite all Caribbean. Apparently, Jean Laffite does go, once he might have been raised in Haiti, but in the reports say that he went down here and died down here or whatever, and did not escape into the interior of the United States. But I would go read those books and look up a bunch of their videos because you can kind of find more of their sources and stuff like that. I can do more about that specific angle and just do a review of this book maybe later on because I thought it was really interesting. The Laffite Revealed book. And honestly, we need to do more researching into these guys because if we want to know more about Laffite, I bet there's probably some records in New Orleans because they get interviewed by... it's probably in here. So yeah, these João de la Porta guys, the Sephardic Jew guys who were working for Laffite in official capacity that we actually still have their stuff up. Oh yeah, let's show you this picture. And no, apparently it's all here. I don't know if y'all can see it. Let me switch cameras here. I have to try to show it to the camera. Because yeah, we need to talk about this other guy about how this all happens. So blah 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 blah. Here we go. Let me read the last chapter of this Jean Laffite section, João de la Porta section of this book. Leo's son, Dr. J.O. Dyer, also an avid historian, later presented himself to Gershom Kershit with a letter of introduction and obtained Gershom's unpublished materials on the De La Porta brothers. Dyer's articles on the Buccaneers and Laffite's camp and other adventures appeared in early Texas newspapers. These writings cover New Orleans residents such as brothers Rezin and James Bowie, for whom the Bowie brothers' knife is named, as well as Jewish leaders such as Adolphus Stern and Major Leon Dyer. Dr. J.O. Dyer wrote, quote, "The material concerning the Buccaneer camps commenced to be collected in 1874. At that time, there were still a number of survivors of the Laffite commune, aged, of course, and of Austin's colony, as in Stephen F. Austin. In the summer of 1874, the writer, bearing a letter of introduction from his father, Colonel Leon Dyer, met Mr. Gershom Kershit, who was friends with the De La Porta brothers, basically, met him in New Orleans and obtained from him a great deal of historical material, which mainly was derived from Joseph Morin, João de la Porta. In 1835, Gershom Kershit made New Orleans his home and became interested in Texas and its history. He befriended Joseph Morin, then an aged man who, poor and in ill health, had returned a few years previously from Austin's colony, where he was well known as Old Man Blanco. From this source, we have inherited much information of the Buccaneer camps on the Texas coast, and also all of the Karankawa clans, for João de la Porta was a member of 3 of these camps and became a trader with the native tribes. Gershom Kershit had acquainted with Adolphus Stern, who lived in Nacogdoches, Texas, and prior to 1835 was postmaster for the Mexican government. The 2 brothers, Rezin and James Bowie, with Adolphus Stern, were in 1835 active in New Orleans in furthering the cause of Texas independence. So yeah, we have Gershom Kershit who knew the brothers, the De La Porte brothers, like personally, who are the historians interviewed basically and got a lot of our stuff from. But you can kind of see this picture of him here. He's kind of got his a Freemasonic hand in the jacket there, but apparently, I don't know if it's popular or not for a lot of people, but that's him in this picture right there. I need to get like a document cam so I can just like lay it out in front of me. So, but yeah, I think, this Gershom Kershit guy and a lot of these other Jewish historians, maybe in New Orleans or maybe even Nacogdoches, I don't know. I think that if we see if there's more on files or more people from these camps, if we look through it, maybe find more people that would have maybe left some written materials or anything, I don't know, to suss out more about this Laffite stuff, because just like they did, right, they traced that official U.S. government surveyor that worked with Laffite and then realized that him and that guy in letters around the time Laffite's maybe dead or just has gone missing or, kind of dropped off the map. He's kind of referring to someone named Maison Rouge or Red House, maybe. And that's, once again, the famous house that Laffite had in Galveston. That's what it was always called, this red brick house, apparently. So, yeah, intelligentsia, human trafficking, maybe possible religious backgrounds or lineages. Don't want to always harp on that. But just of interesting note, especially since the two characters we were concerning with today. So, if you thought that this was an interesting stream, if you thought I brought some interesting perspectives on this, relatively unknown part of the little American history. Oh, this is one more interesting part I should note here. I meant to come back to this Laffite page for Wikipedia, because note this down here. People in the conspiracy community will be like, aha, yeah, because if you already don't like Disney, well, here's just more of these clues about, quote-unquote controlling who, okay? Disneyland. Disneyland memorializes Laffite with a ship anchor monument and accompanying plaque in New Orleans Square. The Pirates of the Caribbean ride has a boat dock labeled Laffite's Landing. So, yeah, we get Laffite, and once again, there's already a Disney movie. I'm pretty sure it's from whenever. I don't remember the year. It's an much older movie. Is it this one? No, that's a later one. What is it? Maybe this is it. No, that's not a Disney one. I'm pretty sure. I swore it was a Disney one. Yeah, but it must be like Laffite working with like Andrew Jackson or whatever. Yeah, for before the Battle of New Orleans. Or a movie about Laffite, anyway. But yeah, we get this character who's also... Oh, yeah, let me read you this other part. Yeah, I should also note that it's not just delivering slaves or whatever, in a sense, but, literal kidnapping in some cases, okay? Not just like, oh, yeah, Spanish slave ship or whatever. In some cases, he was also straight up, like, kidnapping a dude who was just like... He was like a free man, and... he was like a cook on a ship, and he essentially was like, yo, yeah, I wasn't even a slave, and they like kidnapped me and put me in slavery, basically. So yeah, it's not even, it's, that's pretty much like kidnapping or whatever, right? It's kind of not even, it's a whole other thing, right? Let's see, where is this page from? I wanted to read it because, yeah, the whole part was wild. Let's see. Yeah, I had this page pulled up and then I accidentally closed it. Let me see. Nope, maybe I won't find it. Yeah, I guess I lost my page. Sorry, y'all. Thought I had it up here. But not to tarry on about nothing here. There was just a case, but yeah, that it wasn't just, it was straight up putting dudes into slavery and the like. So just once again, these figures that kind of get fun little mentions in the history books or get little Disney shout outs or whatever, right? At least in One Piece, as I was saying, that he's associated with the character Blackbeard, who's obviously a bad guy. So yeah, he'll probably be like a bad guy at the end of it all. So Yeah, it's interesting to see how all this stuff will play out in One Piece, and maybe we'll get a different rendition of Laffite where, once again, we get all these, oh, Battle of New Orleans, thanks for helping out. Oh, he's a pirate, right? When we don't really realize that, piracy is often involved with, like, dealing slaves. And so, just one thing to consider. But otherwise, if you thought this was a fun stream, if you liked my connections that I made with Jeffrey Epstein and Jean Laffite, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. And be sure to check out all the links down below where I'm writing essays on Substack. We're dropping book club meetings and having book club on Patreon. And YouTube channel members, of course, I'll put some more content in here. And any of them all of these things all include a private Discord, lifetime access to our private Discord. So if you want to come hang out with us real time, do some research, and hang out, make sure you do that, and it really helps support the channel. And so thank you to all of our supporters out there. I could not do this without you. I thoroughly appreciate you. So be back. I'll be back here for another stream next Wednesday. If you like the stream, drop all your thoughts down below and probably make some suggestions if you have any. Otherwise, I'm just gonna go for the muse every single time and just kind of see what pops up. But thank you all again. Hope to see you next week. And as always, Julius